Good evening. Thanks to Hugh, Matthew, and Amy for organizing this special gathering and inviting a few of us who could not be with you to send in our comments by video. I'm Ched Myers, and these loving thoughts are coming to you from the town of Oakview in the Ventura River watershed in Southern California, the heart of unceded and untreated Chumash territory, where we, like the Center and Library for the Bible and Social Justice, try to work at the intersection of seminary, sanctuary, streets, and soil. It's fitting to begin by invoking a symbol from the Hebrew Bible. In the old ways of Israel, ancient trees were considered sacred. Abraham, Gideon, and Elijah all met the Creator under their venerable branches. As 3rd Isaiah put it, like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be. The elders of the community would sit under these trees, giving counsel, settling disputes, keeping ceremonies. Indeed, elders are themselves like such trees, sowing seeds of new life, nurturing the young, standing as sentinels who refuse to yield to the seductions, distractions, and withering violence of life under empire. You've been hearing about how Norman Gottwald was a world-class scholar in his professional life, but he was also an oak of an elder. Skin as thick as bark, a reach that defied gravity, providing cover for those who sat under him, a kind of axis mundi in our lives, bridging heaven and earth. So we cannot honor him enough, and I add my thanks to you who have gathered there in Denver to remember this friend, mentor, and elder. On August 6th of this year, a memorial was held for Norm, curated by First Baptist Church of Berkeley, in which he and his partner Laura were active members. This memorial was the last public gathering of this congregation, which closed its doors after more than a century and a quarter of ministry. What a beautiful gesture. The church remembering their member and donating some of their assets to the Center and Library for the Bible and Social Justice. Yet another testimony to Norm's impact on friends and colleagues. You know that after his upbringing in the Midwest and early academic career, Norm became deeply involved in the social justice energy of the 60s, as noted here by his colleague, Roland Boer. This included his first of many collaborations with New Testament scholar Jack Elliott, who passed away just 6 months before Norman. I trust you've heard about their infamous Bay Area Studies in Theology and Related Disciplines, or Bastards group. And perhaps someone has mentioned how in 1973, Norm helped start a journal called Radical Religion out of Berkeley Free Church, which published until 1981. Ironically, the only place to find issues of that magazine today is the Graduate Theological Union Library, the construction of which was opposed by the Radical Religion Collective, which tried to save the property called Maggie's Farm. As an old Berkeley resident, I appreciate that witness. You're all well aware how Norm's 1979 Tribes of Yahweh was initially greeted with all the insular ambivalence that establishment biblical studies could muster. But Frank Frick, one of the deans of Hebrew Bible studies at the time, had it right. This book would eventually turn the study of Israel's origins upside down. Norman compelled the Biblical Academy to take social history seriously, championed a liberation perspective, took public stands on controversial issues, and did all this amidst the rightward cultural swing of the Reagan-Bush era. But though Gottwald is widely recognized for spearheading the scholarly movement to employ socio-political hermeneutics to read the Bible, he also made numerous efforts to popularize this approach beyond the academy. One effort was The Bible and Liberation, first published in 1976 by the Radical Religion Collective as a reader. I still have one of those old dog-eared original large format copies. In 1983, it was formally published by Orbis Books as an anthology, and then in 1993, republished, co-edited by Norm's New Testament counterpart, Richard Horsley. Their introduction advocates the need to bridge certain frustrating and destructive chasms that had emerged in modern Western study and use of the Bible between thought and practice, biblical academics and popular Bible study, religion and the rest of life, and the past as dead history and the present as real life. As a young student of the New Testament, this resonated so deeply with me that the work of trying to bridge these chasms became my own marching orders, despite the fact that I would never get to study formally under Professor Gottwald. I expressed my appreciation for how Norm paid attention to popular movements beyond the academy in these lines that I contributed to Norm's community-curated official obituary. An epoch-changing thinker, Norm was also a democratic scholar and populist who made his material, both published and unpublished, available to students and non-academics. A movement builder and a mentor, he sought out conversation with colleagues around the world, collaborated on many projects, lent support to aspiring scholars, and generously helped many young writers get published. He often taught continuing education classes for clergy and laity, as well as at non-traditional spaces. Those words can be illustrated by three very personal experiences I had with Norm, spanning a quarter century. My first memory of Norman is from the late 1970s, after he'd left the Bay Area to teach more racially and economically diverse students at NYTS. I was a senior at UC Berkeley, living in an intentional Christian community committed to faith and social justice activism. When we heard word that this radical Hebrew Bible theologian was giving a guest lecture to a class at the GTU, several of us trooped up and snuck into the talk. But Norm welcomed us as he would any other student. I recall him passing out freely drafts of his to-be-published Tribes of Yahweh to participants of the seminar with not a shed of proprietary concern. As a young skeptic of the ivory tower academia, I thought to myself, now here is a people scholar. That initial impression struck me deeply, stayed with me a long time. I didn't meet Norm again until a decade later. He, of course, continued to publish hugely important works, slowly turning the tide of scholarly opinion until he was elected SBL president in 1992, as you know. But on a spring afternoon in New York City in 1985, I sat trembling in his apartment, having traveled cross-country, hat in hand. As an unpublished, non-doctoral student activist, I had importuned on this famous scholar to look at my lengthy manuscript exploring a political reading of Mark's Gospel. Of the several academics I'd sent it to, only Norm had responded. Though he'd scarcely met me, not only did Norman read my draft, he received me into his home, went over it with me in detail with enthusiasm, and then advocated for its publication at Orbis Books. Without his help, Binding the Strong Man would likely never have gotten published. My life has not been the same since, and for this hand up, I remain profoundly grateful. It was only after he retired, however, that I really got to know and love this man. Even as he continued to write and lecture, he took time and energy to support alternative experiments in theological education, such as our Word and World schools, where he enthusiastically taught and graciously mentored our interns. In fact, Norm felt so positively about Word and World that in 2006, he offered to us his world-class library. It was a stunning gesture of affirmation and solidarity. But alas, I had to admit to him that our shoestring collaborative didn't even have an office in which we might house this treasure. Fortunately, better things were in store, because that offer began a conversation between us about how and where his biblio-legacy might be curated to resource faith-rooted social movements. Norm contacted retired New Testament scholars Jack Elliott and Herman Waitchen, and thus commenced yet another experiment called the CLBSJ, thanks to the hospitality of the Stony Point Retreat Center in New York and its co-director, Rick Ufford Chase. In 2011, 11 years and 1 month ago today, the center and library opened. That space in Stony Point and online today flourishes as the heart of Norman's material and spiritual patrimony. It even has its own imprint series at Whipfenstock. Amy Dalton and Hugh Page will tell you the amazing story of the subsequent decade-long growth of this intersectional experiment. And I join them in urging you to engage and support this heritage work going forward in Norman's honor. From that first lecture that I snuck into 45 years ago to the day Norman crossed over the Jordan, he modeled for me and for so many others what it means to be a true people's scholar. Yes, he was perhaps the leading academic biblical mind over this period. And let us not forget how he took his lumps before his work was vindicated. But this giant of a thinker also bothered to take the time to welcome inquiring minds, regardless of their academic pedigree, to help aspiring writers get published, and to mentor young activists and students alike. The last time I saw Norm was his and Laura's visit to our home just a couple of years ago, in the depths of the pandemic. I took that opportunity to plant a smooch on him because I loved and love still this man, his work, and his legacy. Thanks for the opportunity to beam in.